Hello, and welcome to episode 46 of Constructing Comics, a podcast building stories one page and one panel at a time. On this episode, we have a review of House of X, the house that Xavier built, released by Marvel Comics on July 24th, 2019. Your creative team on this comic is writer Jonathan Hickman. Your penciler and inker is Pepe Larraz. You have a colorist of Marte Gracia, and you have letterers of Virtual Calligraphy and Clayton Cowles. So this is your spoiler alert for House of X #1, and this is Matt, and I'm joined by my co-host Noah.
Hey there.
So Noah, before we take our deep dive and we bring up our slides and we talk about this, why don't you lead us off with your initial thoughts on House of X #1?
Yeah, I love it. It's got a great creepy sci-fi vibe going for it, and I really love that. Hickman's the best at writing that kind of stuff, I find.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I love it. What about you? What's your initial thoughts?
I am pretty much with most of the reviews that I've seen. I'm very excited. I am very pulled in by this first issue. It has lots of questions, not a lot of answers, and new setups, and I just want to see how it develops. So I'm pretty excited. And I think we've talked about Hickman before, but if anybody knows that I'm a big Hickman fan, so I'm pretty excited about this.
Yeah, and I've read a lot of Hickman, but not as much, not like everything. But I've read a couple of his Marvel things, a lot of his Marvel stuff, and a lot of his Image stuff, and I love that stuff. And he's an amazing writer with a very unique style. So and he brought this style to X-Men, and it translated beautifully to the storyline.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was done.
No, so I think one thing that's very interesting is when we open up this book, we instantly know that we're in a Hickman book. We instantly go to the infograph page, and the first page is very sparse, but we know what we're getting into. Anybody who's read a Hickman comic.
Yeah, because Hickman's, as we covered in one of the episodes, Hickman's a graphic designer by trade, so he fills his worlds with this great language of sorts. He did that most recently on Black Monday, and he does it in East of West as well, where he just, he really draws upon his design background to fill in the world. And he did that with this as well. Right when, the X-Men universe couldn't get more complicated, Hickman adds another level of complication onto it by writing a whole new language for the X-Men to speak in for this series. But it's not the point where like it feels convoluted or overly complicated. It serves a purpose to the storyline completely, like it always does in a Hickman book. So
yeah, so I think one thing that's interesting is like the Stanley the Stanley like comment that it's actually, I think I'm incorrect there. I think it's like the Jim Shooter comment that like every comic is somebody's first comic, so right. That you need to like introduce the characters, and that's like a lot of times where you get I, Magneto, the leader of the evil mutants, am here to tell you, Wolverine, why I am going to attack your school for gifted youngsters. Like, we don't get any of that. Like, no. We get the infograph page, and then we get basically 2 pages with very little dialogue. So if you can, do you want to bring up?
Yeah, I'll bring up the slides.
Because
I don't actually have the first infographic page. I'm just jumping straight into the story, so I'm glad you covered that.
Yeah, well, the first infographic is very sparse, but but here we start off, and we have very little dialogue, but we see some things being hatched. And we see this figure here, and then we get the classic, to me, my X-Men. But what do you think about these first 2 pages that we see here after the infograph?
Yeah, I love the creepy vibe that you're getting off of this. This is sort of this immediately invokes imagery from like Invasion of the Body Snatchers and things. Mm-hmm. Well, you have this first very cosmic plant growing in the, on our Earth as we know it, and then from this tree grows these pods where Xavier stands above these two people coming out of emerging from the pods. One of them, I don't have the panel in here, but one of them's eyes glow like Cyclops' eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So you get this very creepy science fiction vibe. It reminds me of Annihilation meets Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So you got this very unsettling sequence starting it off, which makes you doubt the reality of Krakoa, which is the world that the X-Men want to, sorry, not the world, but sort of the country or the nation that Charles Xavier wants to make a sovereign nation so that the mutants and humans can finally live in harmony. But as we'll find out later, he has more to offer than just a new nation.
Yeah, and I think that is a throwback to like early X-Men. I think there was a living island of Krakoa that like in those early X-Men issues that was like a key like battleground or fighting point. So like I feel like this is a little bit of a Marvel Universe throwback to have the same island.
Yeah, and I was just actually complaining about the movies. I didn't see the new Dark Phoenix or anything like that, but I have one of my best friends did, and she was just, hated it, and she's a huge fan of the films, huge fan of the comics, especially the older ones.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I didn't want to go see it is that just from the trailers, I just couldn't take another X-Men film that's terrestrial, or, based on just sort of like urban scenarios and stuff like that with the military and all that. Like I really wanted to see the exotic locations from X-Men comics. And so when I opened this book and it like immediately it stakes you to like one of those exotic locations that are sort of common in X-Men books, I was very happy about that. That like this is really a comic that's taking you out of sort of the urban environment that most superhero books, can take place in. Like this is really elevating the story to this new level of science fiction that I love.
Yeah, and so in the history of Marvel Comics, there's always been this sort of like upswing and downswing with like the number of mutants that they have. So like you would have those early Marvel like Kirby and Lee books where like mutants were showing up, and then you had like the Grant Morrison where like a ton more mutants showed up. But then you had House of M where the Scarlet Witch says no more mutants, and then you go down to the 198 remaining mutants. So this is like this helps with that sort of like upswing and downswing. So now we're swinging back up where we have the possibility of so many more mutants showing up.
Yeah, and they mentioned the House of M event later in the comic through one of the infographs. Mm-hmm. So like I said, yeah, this is Xavier in shadow here with the Cerebro helmet constantly on his head. Mm-hmm. But then you cut to this great sequence, I think, of just little vignettes of different characters at different parts of the globe. I just sort of like these simple, sequence of these characters. You never see their faces. It's just these nice little vignettes. You know who they are, but it's cool to see this. And these plants, they'll explain what these are and how they relate to everything once we introduce sort of the antagonists. Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about like page design, but like these two pages right here, these are like solid beats, like 1, 2, 3, 4 through 8, where we're in different locations, we're with different people, and we're progressing through time. So as I've said, we've talked about page design, we've talked about beats, but this is like consistent, like let's move through time, location, and move the story along. So these are pretty great.
Yeah, I love these vignettes, and this just highlights how well Pepe Larraz and what was it, Garcia? Is that the colorist?
It's I think it's Marte Gracia.
Marte Garcia. They just work beautifully in this book. It's you have these understated panels, but then you'll get these great, not splash pages. There's not a splash page in the whole issue or a double page spread or anything like that, but these sort of half pages where you get these great moments of just beautiful color and line. Here's more of those moments. These are the two of the twins that we'll meet just about to come up. But right there, we were talking about this offline. That looks like triplets right there.
That is
walking
true,
into the building. Yeah, and you had talked about that. There are triplets that hang out with Emma Frost normally. So the Emma Frost could be in there, and she's not in this issue, but she could definitely be in Powers of X. And I have seen her on the promotional stuff. So, yeah.
So let me ask you a question. How much do you think the fact that it's set in Jerusalem is a coincidence, or do you think that that's a little sort of like a nod to like a modern religion, which we'll touch on probably when we get to that last page?
I think it definitely is a heavy-handed, I guess, metaphorical, location, being a holy city, Jerusalem being the, basically the religious capital for 3 different religions, and then of course now it's going to be the 4th, as Magneto will explain later.
Yeah, we'll get to that at the end.
Yeah. I like these. This is the end of I think one of the pages, and this is the top of the next page. And I just sort of like, what's the difference kind of panels, Of course it's obvious what the difference is, but
yeah,
I just like panels like that. I love again, I like right here, you get this mixture of different plant life from different areas, so you can tell it's like, not of this earth. There's something unnatural here. Again, kind of like Annihilation.
Mm-hmm.
Where Annihilation, they talk about like the splicing of different plants, and that just sort of shows maybe something more cosmic going on. So I think there might be a cosmic answer to certain things in this, but I'm reserving it. It might be all mutant based. I don't know.
Yeah, and as far as like comic storytelling goes, is like the panel where there's like very little vegetation is the last page. And then there's the page turn, and the vegetation is full, and we're in the now. So that's like that's another thing that you can only do in comics.
Yeah.
I guess you could do it in a movie with like a splice cut or really quick, but like that page turn is like,
it's a great page turn.
It's a way to like convey time that is done in comics really well.
And this book was great. I mean, I read it on my phone, but even then, like, panel to panel on the Marvel Insider app was pretty great experience reading it. This book was sort of written so that it could be enjoyed no matter how you were reading it.
Mm-hmm.
And that introduces our some I don't know if they're antagonists or what, but these ambassadors from Earth visiting Krakoa, and Magneto and the twins are sort of touring them around the new nation. More more vegetation growing inside, growing around the architecture.
Mm-hmm.
And then Magneto, of course, is introduced in his cool white outfit. I really like this costume. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I like it. The problem with Magneto is it's like you have to play that. Double-edged sword where he's like an old guy, but he's also still a powerful guy, and they do it really well here. With this, he appears really powerful. We don't see a lot of his face here with the helmet, and anybody who knows an X-Men comic knows the history of Magneto. So they do show him as a really powerful figure here, which is sometimes difficult to do with somebody who should be in his 90s, if he's
close to 100 at this point,
if he's aging correctly. So they do a really great job, and it's almost like that James Bond villain moment where he's like in his lair. He's got a waterfall behind him.
Yeah.
He's standing on a platform. He's got two beautiful women around him, and he's sort of like holding court. So it's striking on so many levels.
Yeah, and we could definitely do a whole episode breaking down any one of the pages in this issue. I don't have very many on this slide just because I don't want the video to be taken down. So I don't have very many full pages on here.
Mm-hmm.
But the composition just on this panel alone, all these guiding lines around the characters and how it moves your eye left to right is really beautiful. I like just sort of the lack of straight lines in the upper half, and then we have these more straighter lines in the bottom. It's a good juxtaposition of straight and curvy, but like it sort of all fits really well together. Yeah, it's just beautiful line work. And also, I'm really jealous of Pepe Larraz getting to draw all these cool images of all these X-Men characters. Like, this is a great intro to Magneto, and I didn't even show the intro to the twins, but even their intro is cool. Like this, Pepe Larraz really loves these characters, and you can see that in how he draws them. Like, he just seems to relish introducing these Marvel characters, and that's pretty great to see. From a comics reading perspective, like, it's always awesome to see them introduce characters or like, that are well established, but with the prestige that comes with these like historical, iconic Marvel villains and superheroes.
Yeah. So like earlier I was talking about how and this might have been before the show, but we were talking about like the way that like comics used to be written, where they'd be like, I, Magneto, am going to walk through the store. But like here, this is modern like storytelling. Like he never, like he could very clearly say, I am Magneto. I am Charles Xavier's replacement here today. But like he doesn't do that here, which is really cool. So.
Yeah, I will say, though, this one, as far as Hickman books go, this one is easier to follow than most, but still it never falls into the Chris Claremont way of writing things, like where it's just, you see here, this is also, Clayton Cowles and the other letterer just doing a good job working with the composition in the negative space of the artwork, and of course the artist giving them negative space to work with so that these thought balloons don't invade these beautiful this beautiful composition and these beautiful lines and colors. Same here as well. It's just Hickman knows not to crowd the panels, and that this issue is very clear with that. He uses the infographics to be the exposition dumps, and it makes sense because it's sort of like, as we'll learn, there's a reason for those exposition dumps existing.
Yeah, and so the next page is a double page. I know that like what you're showing here is not, but the next page is a double page of the flowers, which is sort of like the new designer drugs,
right?
Are going to be used as leverage, which will play in. But let's go ahead and go to the art pages that you had.
Yeah, next would be Jean Grey's introduction. Again, like, contrast here with how he presents Magneto to how he presents Jean Grey. Both are very respective of the character and their origins, making it clear that he is the imposing, still like warlord of the X-Men universe, and then Jean Grey is sort of the nurturing, female figure of the X-Men universe. She's sort of the mother figure to everyone. With how doting she is upon these new mutants coming into the universe. You see a little bit of the portals here. This panel and then it following, I think, was also gave me some creepy vibes because like Wolverine's too happy in this sequence. Yeah, like it's sort of, I don't have the close-up of him on his face because I want people to go out and read the book themselves so that they can see his expression. But like it's almost too weird. Like this is almost like too eerie, like how happy and great everything is in an X-Men book. Especially when Wolverine is happy, nothing can be good. Because it's like, no, something's up. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now, and that is not the Wolverine that uh, we've been introduced to, and sort of like the late '80s, '90s, grim and gritty. Um,
And I think we could also say that about what you were talking about, where these flowers that we were seeing earlier, these flowers that are being planted by everyone are the key to these medications, like this miracle medicine that they talk about.
mm-hmm.
Always in a book, you always sort of like, okay, wait a minute, that kind of thing. When you have a medicine that gives life and cures like illnesses that should not be able to be cured instantly and things like that, that's always a problem, whether it's something like, Soylent Green or something like that. You get the Soylent Green vibes from these flowers right off the bat, where it's like, I don't know, like, this is what Xavier offers the world so that they recognize Krakoa as a sovereign nation, but at the same time, it's almost too good to be true, everything that he's offering.
Yeah, and so we've talked about like how uncomfortable this book has made us from the start. And
yeah,
I think one of the uncomfortable moments is this Jean Grey. Like, which Jean Grey is this that we're seeing right here?
Yeah.
Like, there's been so much playing with the X-Men timeline, and Jean Grey herself is somebody who can like sort of come and go and manifest and show up. Like, this is really uncomfortable seeing her in this outfit. You're like,
yeah,
which Jean Grey is this? Because she's obviously caring and nurturing for this young mutant. And then we get this sort of glance between her and Xavier. But it's like, again, I'm uncomfortable. I'm like, I've been dumped into this strange timeline, the strange land, and now I have characters that I'm not quite sure which character I'm seeing right now. So again, for a first issue to introduce so many questions and make me want to read more, make me want to figure out more, the introduction of this Jean Grey is one of those.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of questions here, especially when you have a new design of Magneto's costume, but a throwback for Jean Grey. There's an incongruity here across the aesthetic. I like that, sort of playing with the art style, using the art style, and then they're using their costumes are very reminiscent of what's it called? Grant Morrison's X-Men.
Yeah,
like the big yellow X on theirs. And Wolverine's costume is sort of a newer design, of course, too. And then we'll see that Cyclops has something that's very reminiscent of like Astonishing X-Men with Joss Whedon's sort of costume. But yeah, we'll get to that. Here's some more infographics of the land of Krakoa. So you get, Hickman's great graphic design using some data to tell the story. Emily would love this. You get some good lists here. This is just how committed Hickman is to filling out this world. He's very detailed with all his storytelling and his world building. And again, X-Men is already a complicated world in a larger, complicated Marvel universe. And then he just sort of added to it. It's pretty intense, his world building.
Yeah, and so there was a time when the X-Men were like either exiled or located in Australia, and I'm trying to think if maybe there's a reason why they're so far away from the United States here in this. Yeah. He could have very easily put this in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, but he's moved them. Well, depending on which ocean you want to look at. If you want to look at like traditionally, like old school, like, Europe to America, that sort of new world, like that was the main ocean. But he's put them so far away from America right now. I'm wondering if that's a deliberate choice, or if that was just sort of a nod to the fact that at one point the X-Men were based out of Australia.
It probably is. Hickman's a huge fan of these characters, and he knows the shorthand of everyone. And he writes kind of like how Grant Morrison writes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where Grant Morrison's not someone to be like to crap on other people's, you know, storylines and things like that. Hickman's not that way at all either. He just wants to tell a story. At least that's what I get from him when he writes Marvel stuff. You know, he's completely fine with referencing everyone else's stories. He did that a lot in his Infinity and Secret Wars stuff. You know,
Yeah. No.
he's like, yeah,
No. I'm
he's
sorry.
like,
Go ahead.
yeah. I was just saying, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he's homaging the fact that they're based in Australia. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah, and then
after this, we get this sort of interlude here that I have to admit is a bit confusing to me, but
yeah.
I'd like to hear your take on it.
Yeah, and I read a review where they presume these guys are the antagonists. So
Okay.
I automatically am like, no, these guys are probably going to end up being the protagonists, or at least sort of the middlemen that will help figure out what's going on with, you know, the House of X at this
Mhm.
point in time. So this is a spaceship that's about to dock in this space station that's close to the sun right here. And we get introduced to these characters again, not too much close-ups, but they're in AIM gear. If you can sort of see their helmet shape right there.
Yeah, I
But
saw that.
they're a mix of AIM, sword, shield, Alpha Flight, and I can't remember what it is. But they are the Orcus protocols. Orcus is their agency name, and they are Doomsday. They are a Doomsday sort of like, I guess, deterrent agency. And they have these greenhouses set up close to the sun on the space station, which I like. So I guess to talk about the art style here, you get these very like, you know, warm colors and saturated colors here on Krakoa, contrasted by this interlude that's very cold and sort of monochromatic. Even when like, like you get these very dark shadows and this like high contrast, like, you know, metallic colors, earthy tones. Even when you get into the maybe someplace with more plant life, you still get very like basic, you know, basic color schemes, nothing very saturated, still very machine oriented. Yeah, like I like, you know, very shadowy. So when you're going this hard into like making something seem like a villain, I always sort of, you know, I always see that as being like, you know, they're trying to make it seem like a villain. They're probably not the villain, right?
Yeah, when you
You know?
overplay your sort of
Yeah,
direction, like you're almost like winking at us, like, "Hey,
yeah,
I'm I'm overplaying this. Like, look at how bad these guys are." And like,
right.
yeah, so there is a little bit of that right here. So I agree with
Yeah,
you.
yeah. And yeah, you get to introduce these scientist characters who will probably be the ones giving us the answers through there. But you still get this cryptic dialogue from Hickman right here with you know, which is odd. I don't see any machines. I see no brothers. I see no sisters. Like, what does that even mean?
Hmm.
You know, like that's Hickman right there being like, I know everything and you don't, in that dialogue. So that's annoying, but at the same time, again, it just makes you want to read more.
Yeah, and like so, there's like a lot of cool imagery here, like the really dark panel where they're uh, sort of walking into uh, the platform. That looks a lot like Aliens.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it
So,
really does. Yeah,
and then
it's got an Event Horizon aliens vibe.
when you get to
Yeah.
this next panel, you sort of get like that sort of like Elysium sort of
Yeah.
feel where it's, you know, spherical, that, you know, things are working really well, you know, we're producing, we have everything under control. So there's a lot of like there's a lot of cool imagery here that like in your mind you see these movies.
Yeah, and we didn't give a spoiler warning at the head of it, but here's a big spoiler right here about the space station that they're in, and it's basically a centrifuge all hovering around a giant sentinel head. And that's a sentinel head, I'm correct, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I did give the spoiler at the end.
Okay, we did. Okay, good.
You're,
Okay, yeah.
you're free to spoil, but yeah, that
Okay. I
was
didn't give the coolest panel though of this. Again, that's something people really need to pick up the book and see the really cool art around this stuff. Like this is the wide shot. The close up of this space station is spectacular. And this is spectacular too, but the close up's really the main panel on the page of the head on the at the center of the centrifuge.
yeah, and this is really cool to like have something that's like steeped in the Marvel universe as far as like a character, but this is very much like that like Kirby celestial being that's just sort of like out there in space, but this is one
Yeah.
that's like a little bit of this, a little bit of that put together that's floating out there in space. And there's just like,
Yeah.
like, like I said, it's just like two things being put together that are at the end of the day, there are two things that are very much Kirby, but they're like
Yeah.
put together for like a new thing. So this is pretty awesome.
And then we'll probably need to talk more about Kirby's influence, of course, because we're in the age of Kirby homage. Kirby's never been more popular and more in the mind's eye, in the public's eye and stuff like that. And basically, the last line of this book is a nod to Kirby. So this is, Kirby's. His hand is very, is like is incredibly like clear on this book.
So let me ask you a question right here. So this has been a very X-Men centric book to this point.
Yeah.
Pretty soon we're going to see some Marvel characters and some Marvel characters that Hickman has written before. But how is something of this size floating in space, and let's just say Tony Stark doesn't know that this is here? Like,
yeah.
Do you think any of that will be answered in House of X, or do you think, or Powers of X? I think people are calling it Powers of 10, but how much do you think that like we're going to get more Marvel Universe connections here? Because I have to think that Tony Stark would have to know that this is out here orbiting. In near space. So we might get a little bit of that later on, but so far we haven't. But what do you think about that?
I think so. I think they know about it just because of the Orcus. Their organization is comprised of so many different organizations. Like, AIM and SHIELD are constantly at each other's throats throughout the Marvel mythos, but in this case, they're working together. Like this organization is like an amalgamation of all the major organizations in the Marvel universe. So I'm guessing we're going to start to see how this affects maybe the Marvel universe at large. And I think what happens next sort of confirms that.
Yeah.
But this isn't just confined to X-Men. This is a Marvel event as much as it is an X-Men event.
Yeah. So the next page is another huge 2-page infograph. But
I don't have that one, sorry.
No, that's fine. People should pick up the book for that. But then we're introduced to some more mutants.
Yeah, some
doing
the Holy Trilogy, I guess. Like the Holy Trinity of the Brotherhood. If you've got Mystique, Sabretooth, and the Toad. The classics.
Yeah,
robbing damage control, which is another way of just showing how far-reaching this storyline is. That like now every major agency in the Marvel universe is represented within 3 pages of each other. So
so this is sort of like a classic heist scene that we see for a couple of pages. But I think the big thing is who shows up to stop this. So do you have a slide for this?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Such a killer half-page panel right there of the Thing and Johnny descending upon the 3 Brotherhood members
Mm-hmm.
There's a great action sequence of them, and then this is a list of security item levels, I guess, at damage control, showing again like this is sort of an all-encompassing. We don't know what they stole from damage control. Well, actually, no, sorry, we do know they stole Soul's hammer.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, then I guess we cut back after this reveal. We cut back and we see more of what Krakoa entails, which they sort of all this, Magneto explains it's no distance or, elevation or, I guess environment. That's what they say.
Yeah.
So like you get this cool, again, exploring Krakoa, seeing what's all going on there. You get these beautiful colors, this beautiful line work. Again, pick up the issue because this is just a slight preview of what all is in that book. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Just these great visuals right here. But then, yes, Fantastic Four show up to help wrap up the fight with the Brotherhood members. They capture Sabretooth, but Mystique and Toad are able to get through the portal to Krakoa, where they are sort of granted asylum from the outside world. This is I'm behind. I only read the first issue of Dan Slott's new Fantastic Four, so I don't know how they got back. But I think this might be Hickman reclaiming what he did to them, where he was like, I was the one who got rid of them originally for a while.
Yeah.
Now he gets to sort of have a part now in bringing them back into the universe.
So strangely enough, the Secret Wars that Hickman did before he left Marvel, that sort of jettisoned the Fantastic Four out of the Marvel U, and Dan Slott did bring them back, and they've been back for a little bit. I'm a little bit behind on that as well, but I do think it's cool that sort of Hickman's first real Marvel work was Fantastic Four. I mean, he did a little bit of Secret Warriors with Bendis, but his first solo title was Fantastic Four. So to have them be the first Marvel characters that we see that are not mutants, not X-Men, that enter this are it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool to see that. I like everyone. I like the new costumes, the blue and the black. It's pretty cool. I like this panel of all of them together. And then I like that Cyclops. You get to see him in his new costume, which is also blue and black, but also very reminiscent of sort of the John Cassidy Astonishing X-Men costume.
Yeah, and Cyclops has been off the board for a while, so
really?
I need to figure out how he's back. I know that he's back, but I don't know exactly how he got back.
Another character Hickman wrote into a weird place.
Yeah,
but he gave him the Phoenix Force at the beginning of Secret Wars.
Correct. Hey, can you go back one panel?
Yeah.
Do you think at any editorial sort of advice that they made Mr. Fantastic look like Jim from The Office?
I wonder. Yeah,
because he's got that look there.
Yeah, he's definitely got the what's his name, John Krasinski, the Quiet Place beard going on right there.
Yeah, I don't know if that's sort of a wink or a nod to all of those people who have been putting pictures up of John as Mr. Fantastic, but I did notice that there.
That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't think of that. I was just more thinking like, oh, I like Mr. Fantastic with the beard more than anything. I was like, I just sort of like it when super dudes grow out their beards. It's pretty cool. I like how these guys are drawn. I like this little detail on the Fantastic car right here. He's got like serial numbers or directions, or maybe that's just shading right there on the edge of that little circle that Sue's standing on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this book is just great to look at. Even if I think I'll revisit it just to look at the artwork in it. It's pretty great. If this is what the artwork's going to be like throughout the 20 issues or whatever, I'm really happy about it. But Cyclops is acting weird throughout this whole interaction with them. He's trying to be diplomatic, but he's almost like, again, he's almost too happy, too peaceful almost. And that leads to this sort of confrontation there. He wants to take Sabretooth back to Krakoa, but Reed sort of smells something fishy going on because he wants to keep Sabretooth in New York. And that leads to this confrontation, which I think is a really great page. I don't have it all in here. Again, it's just a good page. People can buy the issue. Of this great showdown between Reed and Scott is probably my favorite part of the book. I just sort of like, there's this timing, there's this pace that sort of slow and suspenseful throughout this whole confrontation, where it's sort of like who's going to make the first move, and then Cyclops just backs off. And then we go into what basically Cyclops' last words are. He says, tell Franklin he's welcome, or something like that. Or Franklin should join us in Krakoa since he's a mutant. And then you get this great infographic of all the mega powered mutants on the table in this series. At least I'm hoping that's what it is. But I think the ones that are the most interesting and the ones that might be the most threatening are like David Haller, who's unknown, what his affiliation is, or Absalon, Mr. M, and of course Franklin Richards. I'm really interested to see how all those characters are going to be, or even Exodus. What are those characters? What are they? What's up with them?
Yeah. So, two things here, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, and we don't have a slide for this, but we did previous to the podcast, we did talk about the way that Sue is looking at Cyclops,
right,
after he shows up, and a little bit of that is like you want to draw the female form to be appealing, but like she's obviously showing him her feminine wiles there. But Franklin can't be a mutant if he's got his powers didn't manifest as like a normal mutant's powers would manifest, because he's always had those powers. So there's a little bit of like, he's an omega level threat because of what he can do, but he's not really a mutant. So like, I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I think, I don't think they're going to try to be playing it up that Cyclops is Franklin's father or anything like that. And we talked about like, maybe I think Pepe Larraz drew Sue in sort of that flirty stance to maybe make the tension between Scott and Reed even more strong than it was already. Like, there was, of course, the like who's going to get Sabretooth, who's going to take him to justice, of course, but I think also adding like the Reed's very threatened easily, and so is Scott. Scott and Reed are like, very insecure men. So any kind of like threat to their manliness, like especially if there's a woman involved, means that they're instantly going to be at odds with each other. So I'm wondering if that was sort of maybe the psychology he was drawing on. To make her be more flirty. I don't know.
Well, to Reed's defense, he's had to deal with this whole Namor thing for like 50 years or so. So he's pretty much always on the defensive.
He's got Namor. Silver Surfer's tried to get with Sue. Someone more recently, even before Secret Wars, was trying to get with Sue as well. I can't remember who it was. A lot of people have tried. Yeah.
Yeah, and this might just be a ploy by Cyclops to sort of say, look, he's not a mutant, but he's sort of on the level of like Hope or
Right.
um,
Or Legion or somebody
yeah.
like that, you know.
So like if you're not careful, we can sort of coax them over to our side and be like,
Right.
look, you're not a mutant, but you're pretty close to a mutant. Why don't you come over here where people would understand you better? So he's sort of playing that card a little bit there, to sort of
Yeah.
put them in an uncomfortable position. So I think that's more what he's trying to do right there.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. But yeah, I'm interested to see if they'll delve into Franklin Richards, because he's an interesting character and that not a lot of people do a lot with. I mean, like, you know, there's been great stuff done with him. There has been a lot done with him, but like not as much as other characters. Same with, like, he's on the same level as someone like Legion, you know, where it's sort of like, you know about him, but like there haven't been like long running storylines about the characters that last for a long time and really flesh out the characters. But moving on, we go back and we find out that the ambassadors aren't who they seem in a very, I think this is very Hickman-esque right here. These like different character moments, you know, where you get this dialogue about them. We even went over a couple of pages like that on our podcast, where we, like, you know, he does these like he even does it like in this sort of format where it's like these pillars of these characters, and then you get like this info about them either through dialogue or through narration or an infograph or something like that. So this is very, I don't know, this is very iconic Hickman right here, I think, where you get these three characters and you get their backgrounds. You see who's going to agree with Xavier, who's not going to agree with Xavier. And yeah, I really liked this, and it sort of made me smile because I was like, oh, yeah, this is Hickman writing. So, you know, like at one point you might be caught up in the story, and then like Hickman's like, oh, remember, I'm writing this. So yeah.
No, it's pretty great. It's sort of it's in what's weird about this is like it's almost the reverse of the show don't tell rule. This is the tell don't show sort of thing, where the telepath has sort of invaded everybody's mind and is and sort of telling us what's happening, which is, like I said, this is a really cool sort of flip on that show don't tell rule.
Yeah, and that's where I think Snyder and Hickman really intersect in how they write. Scott Snyder does very similar stuff in his books. Most recently, I just finished reading last night, and he does this as well. But he does it in the info dump of like Batman figuring something out, and he just sort of explains it so that like he can let people know, oh, I've got this figured out, and then like, you know, get the reaction out of the criminal and stuff like that, or explain it to someone who doesn't understand what's going on. Hickman writes it very similarly in his books from what I've seen, you know, where he'll have these moments where like, oh, this character is doing this character is doing that, because he's explaining it. One character is explaining it to a character that may not be privy to what's been going on, you know. But in a way that doesn't feel like a complete exposition dump. It plays on the character's abilities, and it plays on sort of what the other characters do and don't know.
Yeah, and if you're a telepath, like this is sort of like the sort of trump card you can play on everybody at the end. That's like, you know, we're roughly, I'm going to guess we're roughly 25, 30 pages in, and she's probably had the read on these guys and this lady since the beginning. But this is just sort of like, you guys, I knew this the whole time and I'm revealing it now. So that, like, if you're a telepath, you can do these sort of things.
Yeah, definitely. And this has also been you know, these twins have been sort of emissaries of Magneto. You know, they are loyal to him, I think, before anyone. So he wanted to get a read on all of these people, and he knew the best way to do that was through them. And he wanted to show them everything just so he could get their reactions. And Then, of course, in typical Magneto fashion, he goes on his, he does a full Magneto thing. I love these two panels right here.
Yeah.
I cut out some of the middlemen. Again, it's a great sequence. Love this. Love the perspective drawing right here of the gun being taken apart and split into its all its little pieces. Great lines. And then, of course, love the drama right here of the sun, casting these almost lens flares behind Magneto as he's approaching this guy. And then he's about to give his grand, warlord speech about how inferior the human race is and how, the only choice humanity has at this point is to kneel before the oncoming supermen that will dominate the earth. It's I don't know, just great drama in these two panels right here.
Yeah, and that takes us into our last page, and this is the very last panel, where we get that sort of last sort of statement, or this is a statement in this case, but sometimes it's a cliffhanger. But this is sort of like the WTF moment, like,
right,
boom, we've been dropped here and the issue's over, where Magneto drops the caption that you have new gods now.
Yeah.
So what do you think about this, how this wraps up?
Oh, I thought it was great drama to end on. It's what, X-Men is such a philosophical book, about humanity and where, how we interact with each other and how, who do we hold into as esteem and things like that, Magneto wants mutants to be seen as gods. Xavier wants us to be seen as just the next step in evolution, there's this introspective, science fiction that X-Men is, it's along the lines of something like Philip K. Dick more than it is like fantasy or something like that, where it's about exploring who we are, like using science fiction to ask a question about us as humanity. So to end with a statement like this, which is so philosophically charged, is perfect for X-Men. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really cool that like Magneto is the one that delivers it, because if you think about that whole Eric Charles dynamic for years, like for him to be the one that finally is able to sort of be like, we're superior to you,
right,
sets up a lot of stuff going forward. If Charles gave this, we've sort of been like, oh man, what happened to Charles? But with this, we're just like, this is Magneto. This is what Magneto does.
Yeah.
But we still have so many questions as to like, what is Charles doing here with these flowers, these drugs, and what has made him come around to Magneto's sort of viewpoint on all of this?
Yeah. Why does Magneto get to speak for Xavier in this moment?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great way to end the first issue on a philosophical note that raises a lot of questions about where the story is going to go from here. I wanted to talk. I don't know how Pepe Larraz does his artwork, but I love the texture in his work. I love these lines, this cross hatching, and then mixed with the screen tone as well. It's just great texture in his inks, and again, great colors. I love the colors on this. But yeah, it was a great issue. Then of course we have the lineup for what's coming up next. And this is going to be pretty, bam, bam, bam.
Yeah, I think every week we alternate between House of X and Powers of 10 or Powers of X. I'm not sure if I know which way that those are being sort of pronounced, but I've heard them both ways. But yeah, it's going to be what 12 weeks of action and storytelling here.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. I hope they do a collection afterwards of both series in one hardcover or something like that, like 12 issue.
Where they put them in order, like
yeah,
order, like
yeah. I'd like that. I'm hoping they do that, and I'll probably not I'll probably wait until we get a confirmation if that's going to happen or not, to double dip and buy a trade or something like that. But I'm hooked. I'm on board from here on out.
Yeah, I think that this was like this was almost like an event without it being an event. Like there was not the well, I mean, there was. I'm going to assume like 3-4 months ago there was like all of the promo material that like Hickman is coming back, and then there was speculation, what is it going to be, and then we found out that it was going to be a an X-Men book. But this is an event without sort of all of like the event hype to it. So but this is going to have a lot of implications in the Marvel universe.
Yeah, and I'm just happy to see an event that isn't too complex, where you just have to read 2 series is really great. This isn't something that's going to be intersecting with every X-Men book, so you have to pick up every single X-Men series to know what's going on. Unlike something like, say, like Avengers No Surrender, or like the worst of the worst. And I like it, but like Secret Empire, where like if you read just the main series, you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah,
like
correct.
You have to be reading every series that ties into it. This will be more along the lines of something like Dark Knight's Metal, where you could read it just the main series and get a good story about it, and then everything else is supplementary. So I'm hoping, and Hickman did this already with Secret Wars, where like you can read the Secret Wars event and it's a great graphic novel on its own, And then of course you have all the tie-in books, which are great as well, but like you don't have to read those to know the main storyline of what that event is. So yeah, I'm happy that they're bringing Hickman on just to do what he does best with events.
Yeah. So I feel like we've covered this issue pretty good. So I think we're gonna bring it to a close here. But I think we're both in agreement that we're pretty excited. Pretty much ready to find out what's going to happen next. So I'd like to thank everybody for listening to us. And if they want to give us a follow on social media, we are on Twitter at ConstructComPod. We are on Instagram at Constructing Comics. I'm sorry, at Constructing Comics Pod. And we are on Facebook at Facebook.com/Constructing Comics. And we also have a YouTube channel under the same name. And we're going to put a video up for this presentation, because this presentation was pretty visual heavy with what we went through. So anybody who wants to see what we were talking about, visit that YouTube channel to see that. And I'll have links to all of that stuff in our show notes. But I'd like to thank everybody for listening, and we'll be back very soon with another episode.